All right, welcome to Kurat Alqadam, the premier podcast on Middle Eastern soccer. Here with my friend Kyle Scher. Scher, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Andrew Gagnon, just another day.
Yes, and this is our first podcast, so please let us know what you think. We always are ready for our supporters to let us know. There's a contact page on our website. If you have any thoughts for the next one, please let us know.
So, big news coming in as the 2022 World Cup's going to be hosted by Qatar,
Yeah, big one.
It's big news for Middle Eastern soccer because it's the first one, right?
Yeah, first ever World Cup being held in a Middle Eastern country. Also, first one in a fully Islamic country. So that's a big doings for both. I'm sure all the AFC is very happy. The Asian Football Confederation, they're excited. It's the first time they've hosted one since 2002 when Japan and South Korea split that World Cup. So let's preface this with what happened in the 2018 World Cup, which was the most Middle Eastern World Cup ever.
I almost feel like that could be a reason for Qatar winning the bid, just that they see the growth in the Middle East and they see that it could be an untapped market that is just exponentially getting better.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the stadiums. I mean, I remember I watched a few years ago, there was like a Jordan qualification game. Obviously, they didn't get in the World Cup, but I mean, that place was going crazy. I mean, 60,000 plus all waving their flags. I mean, it's a real untapped market, and the fans are into it. I think the issue is, can the teams ever get to that next level? And we're going to talk about how the five Middle Eastern teams, while qualifying was a big deal, just didn't exactly have a great run, that's for sure.
I mean, especially looking at Egypt with, 3 straight losses to Uruguay, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, but one of the reasons that Egypt was even there was just they are finally growing their product to where they have one of the best players on the international stage in Mo Salah.
Yeah, obviously, he was a big part of that Liverpool success, which went all the way to the, I believe it was the Champions League finals there, and him getting hurt in that game pretty much lost Liverpool the game. It was 100% a dirty play from Real Madrid, but we'll get into that possibly later. But let's talk about the 5 Middle Eastern teams. Altogether, they had 3 wins, 10 losses, and 2 draws. And 2 out of those 3 wins were against each other. So in Group A, there was Saudi Arabia and Egypt. The Saudis finished with a 1-2 record. Had a big 5-0 loss to the host nation Russia on opening night. Tough game, but a 1-0 loss to Uruguay, who was, I think, heavily favored.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the kind of consolation game when both teams were eliminated, Saudi Arabia took care of business and got it done 3-1.
Yeah, outside of that group, there wasn't a whole lot of success. Iran was able to scrape together a win over Morocco. I mean, obviously, then playing Spain to a 1-0 loss isn't terrible, but would have liked to have seen a win. And then drawing Portugal.
That was a great game.
Even though they didn't move on, that's, a lot to take away from that. Drawing a team that fields Ronaldo, one of the 2 best players in the world, and then only losing by 1 to Spain.
Yeah. I remember that game. I remember Iran, I believe, got a goal called off in that game and then eventually scored late to just get on the board. But, they outplayed Portugal. I remember that. And obviously Morocco, the team in their group as well, they finished 0-2-1. They did draw Spain 2-2 in a spirited contest before they bowed out. They also lost 1-0 to Iran, like we said, a respectable 1-0 loss to Portugal. So, those 4,
that's honestly, looking at it, the growth of these smaller nations in the Middle East to be able to field a team that draws Spain and Portugal is impressive, where you would not have seen that in the last, however many World Cups.
Yeah, we'll touch on 2002 in a little bit, which is probably the best the Middle Eastern team has ever done, but also, rounding out the Middle Eastern teams is Tunisia. They finished with a 1-2 record. They played the heck out of England on opening night for them. 2-1 loss. They lost 5-2 to the eventual. Both these teams were in the third place game, so losing 5-2 to Belgium isn't bad. And then they beat Panama, which was just they were a mess from the CONCACAF North America region. But a respectable win. Yeah, you get it done. It's a World Cup. Anything can happen, and I know before this we were talking about 2002 when Turkey went all the way to the third place game and ended up winning over South Korea, but that was just ultimately one of the most impressive things we've ever seen. And they did like less than nothing, I believe. What was it? They bowed out of the World Cup way back because of financial reason. A team like that to get all the way to the third place is unbelievable.
It's crazy when you look that the first team in a World Cup was Egypt in like the 1930s, and then
it was 34. Yeah,
you don't get a win until Tunisia wins in 1978. I mean, it's almost crazy to see that you have to go 30, 40 years in between, and then until your first major success, 2002. Like, it's growing, it's getting there.
Obviously, they had a lot of teams that have been able to get in a knockout stage at some point or another. It's never really worked out until Turkey, honestly. Morocco in 1986, they got to the round of 16, only to lose to West Germany 1-0. Saudi Arabia, of course, one of the greatest goals you've ever seen at the expense of the United States.
Maradona-esque.
Yeah, and they did end up going to the next stage. They're the first West Asian Arabic national team to advance to the knockout round in 94. Unfortunately, they did end up losing to Sweden, who went all the way to the semis, but nothing to take away from that. That's a great run. And in 2014, recently, before this, Algeria in Brazil almost beat the Germans. You think about it. On that
one of the powerhouses of soccer in the last.
Yeah, ultimately they would end up winning the World Cup that year, but it was after a 1-1 draw against Russia in the group stage. They get in the round of 16. They're facing Germany. After 90 goalless, Germans take the lead, and then all of a sudden the Algerians scored again and tied the game. And ultimately Mesut Ozil, one of the best players I think for Arsenal,
easily.
He scored the winner in the 20th minute, sending Algeria home. And who knows? That game goes to penalties. Anything can happen. So, and Germany doesn't even get to blow out Brazil in front of 100,000 plus.
I mean, just like anything can happen, it's going to be interesting to see with Qatar making their first ever World Cup appearance as default by being the host nation, but still to see them on the stage with, the likes of Germany and England, and it's going to be something that, are they going to get just outright embarrassed? It's going to be very interesting.
Yep. There's a lot of differences with this World Cup, though. One difference, though, is that it still will have 32 teams. It'll be the last one to do that before they come to the North America with a joint bid with the United States, Canada, and Mexico for the 2026 World Cup. 48 teams. Yep. So that's a big one. Qatar, as Kyle said, it's the only team qualified at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot of time since we're just getting into 2019, so a lot of time. But they are making their first World Cup appearance. One of the problems that we're gonna get to all the concerns later, but it is moved to November, December, despite the kicking and screaming of some of the European pro leagues, and the Premier League has a gripe because
the climate just won't support it in the summer, though. I get the gripes.
Yeah,
it
is too hot.
Way too hot.
And they have. I know there's a plan in their bid where they would have things hovering over the stadium. What are the odds that they're gonna?
That's only going to make the infrastructure that they're building even more difficult. If they were gonna go with that plan, I think it's a good thing they didn't. There's already expected 4,000 migrant workers to die while preparing these stadiums.
That's one of the main concerns. That's an estimate from The Guardian. Obviously, they've had, I believe, over 1,200 migrant workers that have already passed away during the construction of these stadiums. I believe, let's take a look here. Now, currently, out of the 8 stadiums that will be used in this games, one of them is upgraded. And one of them was expanded for this World Cup. So they had 2 existing ones. 5 are under construction currently, and one of them's still planned. And so that's they're all on. For those who don't know where Qatar is, it's a little peninsula off to the east of Saudi Arabia. A very oil-rich country, of course. And really, all these games, as you can see right here, are on the eastern coast. There's 5 cities, and 4 of which are in the Doha region. So that's that's obviously at least somewhat good for travelers that there's not too much to go. It's not far, which helps. Unlike the United Games.
You almost have to think, though, with travelers, there's going to be so much just due to the laws. I mean, homosexuality is illegal in Qatar.
Yeah.
Public drinking is illegal in Qatar. I mean,
they have stated that drinking inside the stadium would be permitted, but I mean tailgating is just pretty much out of the question for all fans, and
you almost have to wonder if some countries will be sporting less travelers to these games than say they did in Russia because of, the homosexuality thing's a big deal.
I know homosexuality was an issue in Russia, but I mean you didn't really hear about it during the World Cup. Kind of put on the back burner. I think Russia said, you know what, it's a big international thing. We're gonna put our beliefs to the side to help support this event. And maybe being an Islamic country, obviously they have Sharia law there. Will that dictate the way these things are run? I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in 4 years. Obviously, they have the big FIFA Club World Cup being hosted in November, December 2021. That's the test run for Qatar to see if they can do it. Usually, teams host the Confederations Cup, which is 8 teams from around the world. Usually one from each region, and I believe you get an extra team in whatever region hosts it. So the AFC were to get 2 teams in, and then the defending World Cup champions. So France will be there, but that has not been decided on yet because it will be moved away from Qatar. So it's a good trade-off, I guess. They get to see like Real Madrid or Barcelona or somebody get those like big wigs out to Qatar to see it for the first time, and hopefully it goes well for them.
Hopefully it does go well for Qatar. I mean, especially winning the 2022 bid over the United States. I mean, there's so much that's riding on this for the future of Middle Eastern soccer. If it doesn't go well, how long could it be until we see another one hosted by one of those countries?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the bidding has been certainly lambasted at some point. Lots of controversies headed over that. They said several officials were paid by the Qatar and the bidding officials. The Blatter, the president of FIFA, has been leaked to. It's just a whole bunch of stuff. There was an internal investigation that proved nothing, and then Swiss officials came in and said this is such a sham. Like they fixed it, but luckily, obviously, it worked out for the United States. It worked out for Qatar. Obviously, it's not great. It's 4 more years, but it's just a lot of money that was paid, and just I know the FBI is actually still investigating former CONCACAF president Jack Warner, who was paid $2 million from a firm linked to Qatar. So we'll see about that. But obviously not to take anything away from the games, but they did get it a little shady. One last concern. Obviously, you talked about the migrant workers. Some of them were denied food and water, had their identification papers taken away, and some of them haven't been paid on time or at all. So basically, slave workers. It's not good. And
I mean, honestly, it's terrible. I mean, you always hear about how bad the conditions are for the construction of something to support this event, such as in Brazil or in Russia, but I almost feel like it's taken to another level for this Qatar World Cup. I mean, expecting 4,000 migrant workers to die is just such a high number.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, obviously there's mistakes and all that, but I mean, it's insane. I mean, they're working in the dead heat and they can't even get water. I mean, that's something else. And the last concern, before we get into all the good things that go into this World Cup, Qatar has supposedly funded terrorism, which has gotten them in a lot of trouble recently around the Middle Eastern community. So you'd like to think in this world that nothing's going to happen, but I don't think it'll happen. There's always concerns that go into every sporting event, whether it be the Olympics, World Cups, any international, tournament of any sport, really. There's always concerns, but I think this being probably the premier, sporting event in the world. I mean, soccer is the biggest sport in the world. I don't think there's going to be any concerns there. It's just a matter of, which will come first, the Sharia law or the way that people have the right to exercise their beliefs and their support for their country freely.
I think this is a good time to bring in. Just wanted to give thanks to our sponsors for making this happen. Qatar Airways, prominent.
Yes. If you want to go to the 2022 World Cup, assuming the U.S. doesn't choke again, Qatar Airways is a great way to get there. You fly out of Atlanta, Philadelphia,
DC,
JFK in New York. They're great airways. Similar to like Fly Emirates, the same kind of thing. Very fantastic airline. They fly right into Doha, which is the main hub of the World Cup in 2022. So if you want a big place, big airways to do it, get to Qatar. That's the place.
If you need to stay up on those airways, I would say maybe get a subscription package from Coffee Planet. Roasted right in Dubai, ship it out to you. It's wonderful. Keep you awake the flight and get ready. Get hyped. Support the teams.
Or maybe save it for when you land. Yeah. But yeah, they do a great job. They're very environmentally friendly. They care about their coffee, and it's great to see. They got a great product, and it's definitely worth the money.
So moving back into, I guess, the better side of this topic, if this World Cup goes well for Qatar, how could we see other nations in the Middle East affected by it, in the future?
I'd like to start with just Egypt, just based on Mo Salah himself. He single-handedly carried that team to the World Cup in 2018. Obviously, the going 0-3 wasn't ideal.
Almost expecting he'll get him back there again, though, in 2022.
I think it's definitely assumed that he will. When you have a player of that caliber that can bring you to that promised land of a World Cup bid, it just helps. And that shows also the development of players around the Middle East. If a player of that caliber who can dominate the Premier League in England, one of the best leagues in the world, who's to say, Morocco or Tunisia or any of these other countries in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia historically has been a strong team. Iran seems to get in every year.
Who's going to be the next nation to kind of get their Mo Salah and push them to be better?
And I think this, not to bring Africa into this, but I think they're in kind of the same boat that Middle East is in. You get like one or two good players that go over and play for England in the Premier League or like any of the Serie A, and but how do you build that nationally? I've looked at, and some of them say you need more fields. They said there's like sometimes 10 fields in an entire country. But then you look at a place like Brazil, where obviously a lot of fields, but kids are playing on the street with crumpled up paper as the ball, and barefoot. The United States has its own issues with that. It's almost become like too structured, too civilized, if you will, and it kind of pushes away some of those
It's more regimented. They're not playing it because they love it. They're playing it in part because of that, but it's there's just such a regimented structure of you go play for the U16 USA team, go play for the U18 USA team. Whereas you've got these kids in Brazil just playing it because they love it.
They just do it every day.
They want to get better just out of pure passion.
Yep, and that's I think the passion is there in the Middle East. We talked about how some of these stadiums.
Just watching the game that got Egypt into the World Cup, that qualifying game with Mo Salah's 2 goals, one of them being that penalty kick winner.
Yeah, and
in Egypt,
in Cairo, that place is going crazy.
They clearly have the passion.
Yeah, the passion is there. The passion shouldn't, if it's ever been questioned, it should not be, because the Middle East is soccer crazy. And I want to bring in, of course, the Turkey run in 2002, because that was the most impressive run ever by Middle Eastern nation.
They went all the way to what, the semis?
Semifinal. They won the They won the third place consolation game, so they ultimately finished in third,
just behind Brazil and Germany, I believe, right?
Yeah, they beat South Korea in the third place match. So obviously a big doings for them. And Turkey, of course, does compete in UEFA, which is a little different than Qatar competing in the AFC. But speaking like Turkey, Israel, they're still part of that Middle Eastern kind of, heritage, if you will, and ultimately that's a big big tournament events for Turkey.
Yeah, to only go into 2 prior World Cups, both back in the 50s, to withdraw for financial reasons from one, and to just kind of be there in the second one, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, not only qualify, but run to third place.
Yeah, Turkey, of course, lost their opening match to Brazil 2-1. They rebounded with a tie against Costa Rica, and then a 3-0 crushing blow to China. Got them into the knockout stage. So right there, I mean, obviously they can hang with the big boys. It's nice to see. It's always nice to see like a team like that kind of come out of nowhere, kind of get it done. And then they eliminated one of the host nations, Japan, in the round of 16.
I mean, that almost makes you wonder if a team like Turkey can just come up out of nowhere. Qatar's never been to one. Do they surprise people and win a game or two?
You never know. I mean, we were talking earlier about the United States, how they choked. Of course, a draw down in Trinidad and Tobago ultimately left the Americans out of the World Cup for 2018. So a very frustrating portion for the United States. But
depending on who Qatar gets in their group, I mean, you never know what could happen.
I mean, the Americans aren't that strong right now. They could get in if they could figure it out and get in that group. You never know. Also, we know about all the teams that after they win the World Cup, there's like almost like a hangover. And Spain in 2014, Germany in 2018, they can't even get out of the group stage. And I mean, who knows? Who knows about France? And France gets Qatar. Hey.
What I mean, and if you factor in just Qatar's crowds, if their home crowds show up, it could be electric there. You never know.
Yep. Of course, the only nation ever to not advance out of the group stage was 2010 in South Africa. So everyone else has at least figured it out to get into the round of 16.
Especially even Russia, who many thought in 2018 wouldn't have even made the tournament if they weren't hosting.
Yeah,
and they shocked people, made it out of their group.
I believe they got into the final 8. So
yeah, if looking to Qatar, maybe they have some of that host nation magic in them.
Yeah, I think they have the capabilities there. Obviously, they're not the best team, but it's not always the best team that wins. Even in this last one, Croatia, who had some world class players, but never was even thought to make a run at this. Ended up beating mighty England in the semis to get to the finals, ultimately bowing out to France. But I mean, Croatia, they acted like they were heroes.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the farthest Croatia's ever gone. So I mean, obviously we're talking about a European team that can do it, but I think anyone in the world really can make a run.
And now if you look and Qatar makes a run in Qatar, you can only imagine the growth of youth soccer in the region.
Yeah, or anyone for that matter. This is an opportunity for Saudi Arabia. This is an opportunity for Egypt. This is an opportunity.
Egypt and Iran have
Iran's there.
Chances.
Anyone around there. Tunisia. I mean, if you're from that like North African area, even Morocco, that Middle Eastern kind of area, Israel, Turkey. Like this is your opportunity right now to kind of. I mean, this is your This is your generalized culture. Like I mean, I know South Africa is separate from Africa, but all those African nations, Ghana, Cameroon, all of them, Nigeria. Like the Ivory Coast, they're all there. They know this is their home continent, their home region, and they want to represent it correctly.
Yeah, that 2010 World Cup was a big one for the African continent. And I'm almost thinking, if they can figure it out, Qatar 2022, it could be kind of that push over the ledge that Middle Eastern soccer needs.
Yeah, I think it's a great investment, personally, from FIFA to build the game in the Middle Eastern region. I think they obviously
recognize that it's an untapped market. They need to just get that passion out, and then those teams, once they get better, and you almost look if with the expanded format in the 2026 bid with the United States, Mexico, Canada, if some of these Middle Eastern teams do well in Qatar, all of a sudden you have more teams eligible to play in the tournament in 2026. How many Middle Eastern teams can make it there?
Yep.
With after having 5 in 2018 being the most successful one yet, you could see 6, 7, 8. Who knows?
Yeah, it's a big opportunity, and that's ultimately where we're start signing off. But the opportunity is there. If you're a Middle Eastern nation and you want to put soccer kind of on the map in your country or in the eyes of FIFA and the rest of the world, the chances now.
It's grown a long way from Egypt in the 30s making it for the first time, and Tunisia in the 70s picking up the first win. The first host of a World Cup, Qatar, 2022.
Yep.
So much possibilities.
Yep. Interested to see what's next. All right, so that'll do it for this podcast. Kurat Alqadam. I'm Andrew Gagnon signing off.
Kyle Shear signing off.
All right, thank you for listening, and tune in next week. Tune in next week.